Hiya and welcome to this week's Nurture Note. I am Naomi Aidoo, author, YouVersion partner and teacher, and today we are looking again at Luke chapter 8. If you have been following these Nurture Notes and you are wondering why we're in Luke chapter 8 again, it's because there's a few things that I just couldn't shake that I knew that I wanted to share with you. If you have never looked at Nurture Notes before and this is your first time, then you are very welcome. Right now we're looking through the Gospel of Luke, and not just in a way where we are just looking at what Luke says, however that's a big part of it. We're looking at not only what the book of Luke says, but also what impact that has on our everyday lives, and that's a big part of the reason why we're here again this week. Because last week's question was, what has he done for you lately? This week's question is, what is Jesus saying to you? And I wonder whether you can answer that question, and if you can, how you would answer that question. What is Jesus saying to me right now? Because a further thought is, what is he asking you to do? Now, I don't want you to read the notion of do and act and that sort of thing and shudder and switch off, which I can understand, because who needs more to do in the midst of there being so much busyness? However, when we look at Luke chapter 8, there is so much by way of command and instruction, but it looks very different for different people. Last week, we looked at the formerly demon-possessed man and essentially his miraculous healing and what that meant and what that looked like as he was told what he was told, which we'll get to in a moment. But there's so much more in this chapter which causes us to think, why is one person told one thing and another something else? And that's essentially what I want to touch on here, because there is importance in not just listening but also action. I want us to look at verse 19. This is Jesus' mother and brothers. It says, "Now Jesus' mother and brothers came to see him, but they were not able to get near him because of the crowd. Someone told him, 'Your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to see you.' He replied," this is verse 21, "My mother and brothers are those who hear God's word and put it into practice." And that's what I mean by the importance of listening alongside action. Because we see in action what we covered last week, right? We see the demon-possessed man who, despite wanting to go with Jesus, despite the fact that obviously that would have been the comfortable ask, the fact that he could just stay with the man who had healed him, he said yes when he was told in verse 39, "Return home and tell how much God has done for you." And that was where the title of last week's Nurture Note came from. What has he done for you lately? But how come then, just a few verses later, there's an instruction which says he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened in verse 56. We're going to get to that in a minute. That is the healing of Jairus' daughter. Now there's a lot that goes on before that, but it says in verse 49, "While Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. 'Your daughter is dead,' he said. 'Don't bother the teacher anymore.' Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, 'Don't be afraid, just believe.'" Now, again, belief here is an action. Belief and faith is an action. None of what we do, whether that be rest, whether that be work, whether that be simply having faith and belief, none of it is passive. Absolutely none of it. And so it's so important for us to bear in mind the fact that actually all of this is action, and that's why there's this notion and this title of what is Jesus saying to you for right now, for such a time as this. So why then is there a difference between go and tell everyone what's happened, essentially in verse 39, and then don't tell anyone what's happened in verse 56? It seems as though it doesn't make sense, but actually the difference here isn't about the miracle's size, it's about the setting. In this strictly Jewish region where Jairus was, this talk of the Messiah coming and being there would have been completely taboo, and it would have actually hindered Jesus's ministry, which wasn't the case back in the Gerasenes, which I know I might be pronouncing wrong. So it's important for us to think about that. It's important for us to think about, I've shared it before in another nurture note, about that rhema word, that word in season, because someone else's obedience in sharing might not look like the obedience that you're to have in not sharing, and vice versa. The obedience for you to just sit and wait for instruction might be different to someone else's obedience in them having received the instruction. And you'll know if I'm talking to you, someone that would have received that instruction, know that that instruction truly is for them, and still find themselves not walking and not taking it. And so I wonder what that looks like for you. I wonder what instruction you've received right now, what you've been called to, what you've been told to share and go with, and whether you're heeding that instruction and walking it out. Only you will know. And I'd love for you to share. You can always share that in the comments, right? And so, bearing this in mind, I want to finish kind of where I've started. What's God saying to you? What's he asking you to do? And like I said, feel free to share that by way of accountability. And as ever, I will ask, do subscribe to the channel here. It's always great to see more people jumping in, and also to commenting and sharing. As this YouTube is kind of restarted, you'll see that this Bible teaching thing is not new for me by way of the videos that go back all the way back to 2013. However, actually trying to do YouTube in a bit more of a serious way is. And so subscribers are so welcome. Next week, because we've kind of come back a little bit and circled around a little bit more to Luke 8 again, just because I felt like it was important to really anchor things into essentially the call being different for different people, and the action therefore being different for different people. Next week's nurture note looks at Luke 9 and 10 together, again anchoring into this theme of responsibility, because we can't get away from it in these few passages of Luke, and I'm sure that you'll see that as you read it for yourself. And so jump into the passage, have a read, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Or if you're getting this via email or nurture notes, let me know by way of reply. Just reply to the email nurture note that I send out to you, because I always love to hear from you. And ultimately, act, do. Remember that action can just be to rest, to wait, and to listen. But it's still an action, and it's still an act of obedience that you're taking as you go and grow towards what it is that he's calling you to do for such a time as this. Hope you've been blessed by today's nurture note. I'll see you next week. Keep going, keep growing.